Hi, I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk. It's our 12th episode, and you can watch on our website, familyfirstnz. We're on YouTube as well, on our Facebook page, or my Facebook page, LinkedIn, and even on Twitter. Family First NZ. We're taking on Elon Musk and everywhere. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, the benefit is you can share your comments to the panel and submit any questions you may have. In fact, Matt was on almost before we started and said, let's go. So let's go. Let's welcome the panel. And we actually have four of our regulars absent tonight. Apologies from Christine, Ala, Ronji and Ashley. But we have the super subs coming off the bench. So let's quickly go around the Brady bunch. And to my left is Sue Reid from Masterton. How are you, Sue?
Kia ora, Bob. Yes, I'm good, thanks. Lovely, warm, got the fire going too.
Yeah, well, funny you say about the fire because Alfred has been spending all afternoon chopping wood and you can see the fruit of his labours in the background. How are you, Alfred?
Yeah, I'm good. Look, I was looking at the way that Perry had set up Cherie's beautiful aesthetic look, with the green, plants and stuff like this. And now we've got the green room with old Brendan here. So I thought that I'd actually go a little bit further. And I said to my wife, Mocha, you're going to have to stay in another room now. I'm normally conservatory. I'm going to put on a fire.
Lovely. Now, speaking of that, Cherie is up in Wellsford. And Cherie, I actually think you could probably come down to the studio here because we've built a whole new motorway for you to travel to Auckland that much easier. Can we arrange that next time?
Yeah, well, we've been waiting a long time for this motorway, so I'm pleased it's there and I'm hoping it's going to shave a lot of time off our trip to Auckland. So, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and Brendan was called in at very late notice. I mean, I think he barely warmed up. Wasn't there that famous All Black that got called on at the last moment and kicked the conversion that won us the World Cup? What was his name?
Well,
Test for you guys?
If I can do that, then I'll be impressed.
Yeah, Beaver. That's right. Well done. Yep. So really appreciate your availability, Brendan.
Hey, I want to know what classified documents Alfred's burning in that fire behind him. Though. That's what I'm interested in.
It's all the old launch codes that I had in the secret cabinet.
That's right.
Briefcase.
Right.
All right, and just finally, Bruce in Christchurch, where it's probably the coldest, isn't it, Bruce?
It wasn't too bad today. We got to 15 degrees, which isn't too bad.
Okay. Right, Image of the Week team goes to Johns Hopkins University, who under their Diversity and Inclusion, Gender and Sexuality resource have released a new LGBTQ glossary. And one of the words is lesbian, which is now defined as a non-man attracted to non-men. While past definitions referred to lesbian as a woman, this updated definition includes non-binary people who may also identify with the label. So that's very woke of us. So there's your new definition. Video of the week goes to President Biden, who concluded his speech on gun control at the weekend by telling his audience, God save the Queen, man. Let's have a watch.
All right. God save the Queen, man.
And then the little run. There's the run. Jog. Okay, now the interesting thing, team, is why would an American president speaking in America to an American audience say, God save the Queen? To his defence, he was speaking in Connecticut, which is in New England, but that's not England. Some have speculated that it's such a bizarre thing to say that he may be sending coded messages to Alfred, who's now burning those classified documents. And what's with the man at the end of the sentence? God save the Queen, man. I mean, that's the kind of thing Bruce used to say at Woodstock, didn't you, Bruce? Hey, man.
We did
anyway.
Indeed.
Come on, man. That's his thing, isn't it?
Come on, man. Okay, topics tonight. The latest Ipsos New Zealand Issues Monitor has identified what the 5 major issues are that are keeping New Zealanders awake. Should we ditch MMP and go back to first past the post, or is there something better? Should the rich pay more tax? And we're going to discuss the government's recent guidelines of the length of time you should be spending in the shower and what temperature your heat pump should be set to. But firstly, let's get into our free speech moment, and each panellist is going to be given 90 seconds to get something off their chest. And Sue, you're going to kick us off, and you want to talk about vaping and cannabis, so your time starts now.
Yeah, the issue of vaping was in the news headlines again in recent weeks. And once again, New Zealand has been caught short learning from other countries and how we need to sometimes adjust different policies. In this case, it was Australia and their tightening of vaping regulations and concerns over their use. New Zealand tinkered around the edges, making adjustments to disposables and flavours, and it was hardly a crackdown. I'd like to highlight a bigger concern and why we should be reining in vape availability. A few years ago, Bob, you went to Colorado to research cannabis and the big drug industry and its ill effects. Remember the gummy bears and the cannabis-laden food and drink packages to appeal to the youthful masses. It shocked me. Some things still do. And with the students that would carry handheld vapes, but they contained cannabis oil, and it was a major problem in schools. Take our vape problem now and add in the cannabis, and we're in bigger trouble. We have a relentless movement here in New Zealand that won't accept a referendum outcome and continue to persist that drugs must be liberalised. How big will the vape problem be, and how big will the cannabis vaping be if the government roll over on the drug issue? It should be an election issue. We should be asking every MP, every potential MP, whether they intend to push legalising cannabis. It's time now to know where they stand to avoid a catastrophe.
Well done. Thank you, Sue. Next up is Bob, and your 98 seconds starts now. Last week, biology and fact officially left New Zealand. A new law has come into effect that renders your birth certificate as meaningless. You can change the sex on your birth certificate based on your feelings, not biological fact or what the doctor said when you were born. What stunned me more than the flawed ideology behind this law is that the political parties on the right, National and ACT, unanimously supported this law. Every one of them. Yep, we don't have a left-wing government on issues like this. We have a left-wing woke parliament which denies biological reality. And so a generation of young people are having to grow up in a confused society which denies objective truth, and then we wonder why they're stressed. There will be unintended consequences in terms of safety and recognition for women and children, not just in sports and changing rooms, but in many other policy areas. It will cause more confusion and brokenness for people who deserve to hear the truth and to whom society should be helping to embrace the freedom of their natural biological sex. A birth certificate is not just a piece of paper. As Bruce Logan always drums into me, these issues matter because they concern our fundamental understanding of humanity and who each of us are as male and female, and the kind of adult direction and support our children deserve and should receive from us. Binary is the only gender story there is when it comes to gender and sex distinction. There simply are not many genders which can be chosen at will and can be changed as many times as you think you want to, which is what is allowed under the new law. But of course, there are many different ways to be a healthy male or female without holding to narrow gender stereotypes. Please continue to speak up for biological truth. Our children deserve it, and our society desperately needs it. Alfred, you are next, and your 90 seconds starts now.
Yeah, well, you certainly know it's election year, and that's crazy time when people are asking all sorts of questions. You know, it's in your coffee catch-ups at the cafes, it's in your lunchtime when you're lounging around. You want to talk about other things, but everyone keeps talking about the power of politics. And actually, where do we put our choice and who do we trust has become the big issue. People are talking about, you know, our children at schools and the concern around education, and really it's all about, you know, the power. And I started thinking that back in 1990 there was a rap group called Snap, actually, and they wrote a song in 1990 called Who's Got the Power. I won't try and sing it because Bob will only laugh, but I know Brendan knows it. And it goes like, who's got the power? Anyway, something like that.
That's close, Alfred, close.
I know, it was close. But, you know, I started thinking that back in that period of time, in the 1990s, you know, it was on the 11th of February 1990. It was a famous time because the power in South Africa shifted around apartheid between black South Africans and white South Africans at the release of Nelson Mandela. I started realizing in 1991, it was the time of the Persian Gulf War, where Iraq decided to take power over Kuwait. And then all of a sudden the US sort of took charge and they brought their power to charge on that situation. In the UK, we had Margaret Thatcher, who resigned as the Prime Minister. So there were massive world events happening, big power shifts and struggles. And so I started thinking about, well, getting back to the elections, to the campaign, and to the ordinary person that's on the street thinking about, actually, where does the power reside? And I tell people this, the truth is, actually, you can't legislate against the condition of a person's heart. So first of all, can I encourage you that it's not the government of the day or any other day that's going to solve the issues in our homes. First of all, take back the power of your choice. Whatever you make in your home and the posture of your heart, really starts first. So that's where the power starts first. Then from your heart, it actually then goes into your home. How you look at your family, your children, give them hope. Tell them that despite all of the challenges that you're facing, right, actually, as Kiwis, that we can do great things. We came into this land of plenty because we believed in the window of opportunity. When you're doing that, then you can now start to speak into your communities and start to talk about the values and vision that you believe are really important. So simply it's about this. Take back the power of choice that belongs to you, not to politicians, not to governments, but to you, your family, your community. Just a little message of hope during a really challenging time for everyone out there.
Is that the song, eh? I can just imagine you dancing to this, Alfred.
You don't want to go there.
Okay. Anyway, enough with Dancing with the Stars. Next in line is Bruce, and you want to talk about the Vicar of Dibley, so your 90 seconds starts now.
Well, Bob, is satire impossible in our brave new inclusive world? Has parody fled to another planet? Last week, Dawn French, dressed in her Vicar of Dibley robes, delivered the eulogy at a living funeral of a friend in Truro Cathedral in the UK. Originating in Japan, a living funeral is where friends and family celebrate the life of a terminally ill loved one before death inevitably arrives. Everyone is encouraged to dress up. One man came with a flower pot in his head, as you do. There was a bar, disco lights and comfort cats to stroke along with the ABBA karaoke. So in the jollity of a living funeral, reality and fantasy threatened to merge, suggesting that Jacques and Shakespeare's As You Like It was right after all. The whole world's a stage and everyone is just a bit player. From darkness into the same darkness we go. Whatever the case, the attempt to shroud the taboo of death in forgetfulness is overwhelmingly poignant. Denial of the last enemy will drown us in our own tears. Must every life really end like T.S. Eliot's Hollow Man, not with a bang but a whimper? How else, when the image on the screen and the watcher's body simultaneously inhabit the same world? Nothing here, although the service was held in a cathedral, of the 17th century poet John Donne's victorious "Death, be not proud. One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death, thou shalt die."
Well done. Thank you, Bruce. Now, Cherie, and your topic is social cohesion, and your 90 seconds starts now.
A discussion paper was released today on the cohesiveness of New Zealand society. It found that our status as a cohesive, high-trust nation is deeply strained. There's increased polarisation, low levels of trust in institutions, and unhelpful stirring of tensions by purveyors of mis and disinformation. The journalist Janet Wilson wrote in a recent op-ed, in a quote, "If trust is the glue that holds us together as a functioning society, then the loss of that trust can be graphically charted between the first COVID lockdown and the parliamentary protest." Wilson has highlighted something that many are reluctant to talk about openly, that the COVID response was a deeply traumatic event for the nation. Many lives were hugely impacted by the loss of jobs, businesses, health and relationships, by the difficulty for overseas Kiwis to return home and the inability to farewell loved ones. The unleashing of divisive policies left a significant minority ostracised in society. Anyone who questioned utterances from the podium of truth was silenced, ridiculed or siloed. Even highly qualified doctors and scientists were cancelled. The national opposition failed to even challenge the government narrative. Protesters may have been wrong in some of their views, but the climate was such that alternative views could not even be discussed openly. Today's report mentioned disinformation. The last 2 years have demonstrated that some ideas, initially labelled disinformation, were ultimately proven to be entirely correct. Is it any wonder there is now deep distrust of the authorities? The answer is not increasing control on information, but freedom of speech. We must be mature enough and adult enough to discuss and debate alternative ideas. In that way, we will all get closer to the truth.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you, Cherie. Now let's move on to Brendan. We left you till last, Brendan, so that you had 450 extra seconds to prepare. So there's no excuse.
I'll write my notes. That's what was really going on.
And so your 90 seconds starts now.
Yesterday, there was a policy announcement from National about the fact that they are now going to be considering involvement or membership of a criminal gang as a mitigating factor in criminal sentencing. So regardless of what the crime is, if you're part of a gang, it can now be considered a mitigating circumstance, even if the crime you're committing has nothing to do with involvement or membership of a gang. Now, immediately, the more liberal supporters of the National Party got up in arms online about all of this. But as a Conservative, I'm going to take a different stance. And I'm going to say, for authentic conservatism, we are committed to the truth that evil has no rights. And if you voluntarily involve yourself in an organisation whose raison d'etre, its very reason for existence, is to engage in and perpetrate the evil of criminal offending on a major scale in our society, then you are actively participating in a harm to the common good of our country. And that should absolutely be considered. There is something very different in the moral nature of a church or a sewing club or a tramping club than what there is with a gang. They are not the same thing, and so they therefore should be treated differently. And our government has the power, the moral right, and it absolutely should discourage, through legislation, involvement and participation in gangs. Now, some people panicked and said, well, what if this gets used on the church? The reality is that if the state did that, they would be doing something illegitimate and wrong themselves. But there are already legislation like that exist already in New Zealand. So, for example, it is illegal to use speech to incite criminal offending, criminal acts, but it's not illegal to use speech for religious reasons. So just because we have an anti-incitement clause, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have that, because maybe that could be used on the church as well. Here's the thing, a church and a gang are not the same. A church does not exist to perpetrate grave evil in our society. A gang does, and it should be discouraged through legislation. Here's the thing though, ultimately, I think this needs more than just an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff reaction. I think this is part of the solution. But you also need lots of proactive fences at the top of the cliff if we're going to be successful, and this policy is actually going to succeed in its strategy aim of trying to actually move people away from gangs. Yes, you need active discouragement, tough love, but you also need loving opportunities and pathways to get the heck out of gang life. And that means thinking seriously about the broken communities in our society and the lack of community in general that has now overtaken the West, the New Zealand population and New Zealand society being no different. But evil has no rights, and therefore you can't say, well, the right to freedom of association means I can associate with whoever I want to, whenever I like, even if that association is going to be for the purpose of perpetrating the evil of criminal offending on a major scale in our society.
Yep, well said. Thank you, Brendan. Now, Craig messaged through and he said, I bet Bruce spends the whole week writing that. Actually, Bruce, you just come up with that over your dinner, don't you, Bruce? Because you're just very bright. And June adds to that, Bruce, and says there are definitely a lot of very thoughtful points put forward that deserve some time for digestion. And that is because Leslie said, I again say I'd like these 90 seconds of brilliance in a more tangible form so as to digest them at my leisure. He sort of requested that we somehow provide written copies. So team, what I thought was we would get together all these 90-second ones, write them, and then we'd release them as a best-selling book. And the funds could be used for my Christmas holiday. So we'll have a think about that and see if we can find a publisher. Anyway, let's move on to
I've got the power. I've got the power.
Yeah, I've got the power. That's right. Now, the latest tip, because somebody else got a big amount of money for being asked to write a book. Who was that? That was, Jacinda, that's right.
Jacinda,
so perhaps we could compete against that. Now, anyway, stop distracting. The latest Ipsos New Zealand Issues Monitor finds, which is a major survey which is done, finds that crime, law and order has risen significantly in prominence as an issue. 40% of New Zealanders say it's a key concern, its highest level since tracking began back in 2018. Inflation remains the number one concern. And following a significant increase in February after Cyclone Gabrielle, to its highest point since tracking began, concern for climate change has actually decreased. However, the issue is in the top 5. So here is the top 5. Inflation, cost of living is top, then crime, then housing, then healthcare, and climate change. And you can see economy just behind climate change, but perhaps that's already reflected in number 1. Now you can see the trend lines there for each of those 5 top categories, and a big rise in inflation, cost of living, and also a big rise in crime, but interestingly, a big drop in housing. Healthcare and climate change holding their own. And when people were asked about what would be the big issues over the next 5 years, cost of living actually doesn't remain a concern, but climate change increases. And finally, here's the interesting bit. When they asked which political party could best solve the problems, National outdid Labor in expectation of 4 of the top 6, although, to be honest, I'm surprised to see Labor as the best solution to health. So, panel, let's quickly go around and find out, do any of the results surprise you? Are they your top concerns as well, and have they missed any that aren't already on the list? So, Sue, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think they pretty much fall into where we're all feeling, and general households, and people just want to go to work. People just want to be able to have secure employment. They want to earn a wage. They want to have their homes. They want to keep their families safe, and want to know that they live in a safe community. And if they need help, that they can go to the police station, or they can ring for help, and those police are going to arrive and deal with the problem. So if they have their home, if they have their employment, then they're independent from the government. They're independent from government need. And I think this is a very empowering thing for families. So I'm not surprised that these are the top 5 things. I think when you're feeling all the pressures, I mean, we have an emergency account. Things are tightening up, and things are, you're looking for the breathing space. And, we don't have dependent children anymore. I don't know how some families do it, to be honest, but we're not meant to do it alone. We're all meant to come together as families and help one another out too. The government is the be-all and end-all of all our solutions and monetary solutions.
Okay, Alfred, I'm a bit concerned about the carbon footprint that fireplace is leaving behind you, but apart from that, are these the concerns? Because you were the one who actually alerted me to Ipsos in terms of that it's slightly different to the other polls. It's not just asking who you're voting for, but it's what are the issues you're thinking about.
Yeah, one of the things is that the other polls that are commonly used, and Brendan made a really good point last week when he talked about that, though we've, since 1994, we've transferred over to an MMP electoral system, what these polls are actually doing, they're creating a narrative of actually a first past the post, the 2 major parties. And even when you see some of the Ipsos results, so Ipsos is better because what it does is it begins to ask a deeper question around what are the key issues that are driving you. And as I've said before, it's the issues that will drive the result of where people want to vote. Because remember, people vote on emotion. And at the moment, the emotion is fear and is concern, and people are wanting to get things better. They're doing this. But look, if you look even deeper into the reports, and as I read through the reports again, I'm looking for even deeper understanding, because just because, the data is showing that that's what people want, the question you have to ask, is it really what we need right now? And let's take the cost of living, for instance, which is really high. If you actually look at the 2 colours that are there, the dark green actually talks about what people think in the next 5 years will happen. People still believe in the next 5 years, things are going to be still bad, right? It's still the largest area of concern. At the moment, it's at 63%. And so people still believe that's going to be bad. Then when you go into some of the other data, I know that you don't have it here on your slides, but it starts to ask the questions of the people. Now you're drilling down to what people see as being really important. And the thing is that everyone keeps thinking it's about the Reserve Bank, it's about reducing the OCR, the official cash rate, as it currently stands at the moment. Why? Because that increases what you call the interest rate. And everyone thinks if the Reserve Bank will just decrease that, it will decrease inflation. Now we're not realizing that we've got a country that doesn't always understand the mechanics and the tools that the government uses. The remit of responsibility of the Reserve Bank is to try and keep inflation between what they call 1% to 3% for every medium quarter. So at the moment, the Reserve Bank increases the OCR, so increases the cash rate, the cash rate and the interest rate. And what it's meant to do is to change attitude and behavior that basically it's about spending less and saving more. And at the moment, as you can see, that's not quite working as well as it would like to. But the key area then in regards to inflation and the cost of living is not just about a government solution. Actually, it's a whole community-wide solution. And one thing I learned actually in Bill English's office when I used to spend time there as the Minister of Finance, the economy is not just about cash flow. It's actually about people. It's about attitude that we have to what we have and how and what we do with it. That's really important. So anyway, that's a very long political answer, but I just want to say to you this, that sometimes just because it's what we want, it's not actually what we need. And I think there's some digging deeper that needs to happen with our communities to understand the role of the economy.
Okay. Did you just say you were the Minister of Finance? Oh, you were with the Minister of Finance.
I was smart enough to hang out. The very first place I went to was to hang out at Bill English's office when he was the Minister of Finance.
Learn from the master.
Because there's that old saying, well, that's what they say, where your heart, there lies your treasure, right? I wanted to find out actually, how does our economy actually work?
Yeah. Okay. Bruce, do you agree with those top five, or have you got other concerns?
Yeah, I think I probably do. And so it's very obvious, I suppose. Of course, cost of living is keeping us awake at night, or a lot of people. For some people, mortgage rates will be more than double. Now, that's a big deal. Food's getting dearer, as we all know. And the government is increasingly trying to control the economy, but the more it tries, the more it complicates things, it seems to me. And we all know that inflation is caused by too much borrowing. Factors like COVID lockdowns have helped, war increased transport costs, all these kinds of things. And New Zealand's a long way from the markets. So we've got all those meaningful things that are exacerbated right now. But there's an elephant in the room, and it's been denied, I think, for a long time. Civil society operates most efficiently and economically when married parents are bringing up their children. The research in this is overwhelming, but now it's a forbidden topic. We've developed an entire social ethic that includes discussion around the importance of marriage and children in shaping civil society. And because of that, we're trying to solve a problem by simply throwing more and more money at it, which of course is to deny the nature of the problem. And that's that's a big deal. It's not the only issue, but it is a big contributing issue. And even if inflation was to disappear tomorrow, we would still be in a mess unless we came to grips with that particular thing, I think.
Okay. Brendan?
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised by any of what I see there. I see climate change has sort of snuck up the ratings. To me, that really speaks to the fact that when you ask people, what are you afraid of? Well, it probably depends on perception. And who shapes perception? The media. So I think there's no doubt that people's perceptions will be shaped by, what they're being told to be afraid of. But the top three in particular, I think they are actually genuine fears. You can't hide from that reality. You can't fake that. When you have to pay the grocery bill each week, you know what's going on. Your neighbourhood is getting less and less safe. You know what's going on. And so I'm not surprised by that. One thing, though, that I think is missing here, and I don't know if they poll about this, would be, and I think it'd be very interesting to see what the results would be, is asking people, are they concerned about the competency of the government? And I have a funny feeling a lot of people would say that they're actually worried about the lack of competency from both the ruling party and looking across the aisle. Is National really offering a much greater degree of competency like they did actually in the past under the likes of Joyce and English, where they really were a strong, competent team? And so I think this matters. And I know traditionally conservatism tends to be thought of as being just about perhaps moral or social type issues. But in actual fact, authentic conservatism right at its original beginnings was very clear that one of the most conservative things you can do is actually manage an economy with virtue, and that maintains a stable, just civil order. And if that gets out of kilter, that's a really bad place to be, because it does actually give fodder to revolutionaries who want to propose dangerous ideas as solutions. So I think there's something really important about that, and I suspect a lot of people would say that they are worried about the question of competency. And I look going forward and I think, where are the competent leaders? That's a concern for me.
Okay, Andrew Vossen said, can the graphs be posted? They rotated quite fast. Andrew, just go to Ipsos New Zealand Issues Monitor. So just Google Ipsos New Zealand Issues and you'll see it on the page there, and you can see all of them. Cherie, what's your thoughts? Is this poll reflecting the reality of what people are most concerned about? Because I have to confess, one that I thought actually was quite low in this was education was right down there, and even drug and alcohol abuse. Do you think this poll is accurate?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it seems that inflation, cost of living is a big issue for people today. I mean, I'm concerned about education because I'm concerned about our children, actually. I'm concerned about the next generation and, the educational standards slipping. But not only that, I'm concerned about the welfare of our children with some of the educational policies that have been pushed in the schools at the moment, particularly around gender issue. I'm concerned for their safety, quite frankly. So, yeah, education. I have to tell you that I wrote an article recently and was called A Retired Economist. I can tell you I'm not an economist. The economy is not my strong point. So I appreciate all the comments that others in the panel have made. But I would just say about cost of living that, I found it, I saw the other day the Schools and Lunch program, and I think it's great that our children are being fed schools and lunch, but part of me couldn't help thinking, well, why are the parents not providing meals for their children? And I mean, I grew up in a poor family, to be honest. We had basic food, Wheat Bix for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch with an apple, and meat and 3 veg for dinner. Sure, things like butter, basics, butter and milk are so expensive today, but you can still provide a basic but healthy lunch for your children. So I guess, these are some of the wider issues around these points that don't really come to the surface in this kind of a survey. And it's some of those social issues, I guess, that
Oh, we just lost a little bit of audio there. We'll get that fixed. Actually, I did read that in the last 6 years, fruit has gone up 38%, vegetables 41%, cheese 48%, and eggs 106%. So this is the time to be thinking about all those food costs. Since Labor was elected, all food has increased 29%, but we probably can't just blame Labor. Right, let's move on to the next topic. MMP. Last week we discussed the proposed amendments to fix MMP. But should we just ditch MMP and get a new system? And if so, which one? Has MMP actually been better than the first past the post, which is the old system? Now, just before I go around the panel, and I'll go in the reverse order again, some interesting facts that I just wanted to show you. Firstly, an average of 6% of votes are what are called wasted. In other words, they're votes for a party that don't cross the threshold. So perhaps we should start the wasted party because they got more than 5% overall. It could be led by the Drug Foundation maybe. But last election, 8.5% of votes were effectively wasted. So that begs the question, if you want true proportional representation, should we drop the 5% threshold, which was recommended by the recent review? And one other interesting thing is that of all the votes, 3/4 have gone to the two major parties. Which I think one of you was alluding to, that we still sort of stuck in this rut of it's either National or Labor. But once again, begs the question, are we getting full proportional representation? And just one other graph before I come to you, panel. According to a recent poll, 79% of voters don't want the voting age lowered. So let's go to the panel. Would you vote to change the system of MMP? And if so, what to? We'll start at the bottom. Bruce, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, going back to the first past the post, I voted for first past the post when we had the chance, and I still think it's a better system. I like it better. It's cleaner, it's simpler, and it's easier. I've got a number of objections to MMP as it stands at the moment, but I suppose my major objection to it is that the government chooses half of our MPs because of the party vote or through the party vote. Now, I know that's proportionally totaled out, but it doesn't apply to individuals in the sense that I can't choose who I'm actually voting for. Now, that, of course, you could argue, I suppose, that somebody standing up in an electorate is chosen by the government or by the board of the government before the person gets to be voted for. But at least I know who I'm voting for. But under MMP and under the party vote, I don't. And that doesn't seem democratic to me, or even sensible. And I don't really. It's just a remove away from any kind of influence I might have with my vote.
Okay, Brendan, do you like MMP or got something better?
No, I would actually like us to have a preferential voting system, a single transferable vote, actually.
Same.
And I'll tell you what I think that would achieve. A lot of people right now are voting against things. They're voting out of fear. Alfred talked very succinctly about this last week. And the whole notion of a wasted vote, I actually think it's quite unjust and it's immoral. And I get, though, why people panic. But if you had a single transferable vote, what you could do is you could say, well, my first choice is small party A, and my second choice is Labour, my third choice is National. And so you know that even if your first choice doesn't get in, your vote is not lost. It's not taken from you. I think it's actually a stolen vote, actually, at the end of the day. Instead, it would actually go to your second choice. And I think what that would do is it actually would encourage more people to vote proactively rather than reactively. They would be voting for what they wanted because they knew they could take a risk. And I think it would also actually bring about what MMP is supposed to achieve, which is actually a greater degree of diversity and representation. I think also list MPs, I'm with you, Bruce. To me, this feels like an unaccountable and it feels largely like a waste. We've had reviews already which have said we've got too many MPs, and it seems the list MPs would be the obvious first thing to sort of head to be chopped off on the block. And so, I think for me, and well, we talked about this last week, but we're not really living under an MMP system. And that graph you showed before, Bob, just really proves that basically the way it's been presented is two big parties and then a couple of hangers-on. And I noticed even over the weekend, I think it was at News Hub Nation, had the leader of TOP, the Opportunities Party, on. I'm thinking to myself, why is this small party getting such limelight and none of the others are? This seems to be like a very selective way of presenting things to the electorate, and it doesn't look like MMP to me at all.
Actually, one of the worst examples, Brendan, was on One News last night. They did a little feature on their good friend Chloe Schwarbrick in Auckland and completely misrepresented what MMP did, because I think they were trying to scare people into thinking the Greens weren't going to get 5%, and so therefore Chloe had to win Auckland. But the Greens have been polling around 8 to 10%. I mean, they even said that if Chloe wins Auckland, that she'll drag in extra MPs. Well, that's not true, because they're already above the threshold. So, yeah, boy, there's even misunderstanding within the media. Cherie, what's your thoughts on MMP? Do we need to ditch it?
Well, I found this interesting comment from Damien Grant, actually, in an article that he wrote, which I thought had a lot of truth to it. He said we should be less concerned as to how we elect Parliament, concentrate instead on how much absolute authority it now possesses and how it elects to apply or abuse that power. So, he was looking at the system and the way it was set up, and he was especially referencing the power that the government exerted during COVID. And this report that I mentioned in my little rant, it was actually from Koitu Centre for Informed Futures, and as well as talking about social cohesion, they made some really interesting points about the parliamentary processes. And it seems to me that there needs to be more attention on focusing more on how our parliament works and improving those processes. And we've seen a lot of that recently in the failures with some of the MPs. But this report I referenced, it talked about things like the parliamentary question time becoming more entertainment than informative, and being about point scoring. It talked about the select committees being weak. It talked about parliamentary urgency being misused to rush through laws without meaningful debate or reflection. It talked about how Parliament operates with very strong party whips, meaning the executive is nearly always in control and dominates the decision-making process. And also, of course, as been mentioned before, that we don't have an upper house or a second house with oversight and powers of review. So we don't have some of the checks and balances that other countries have. So I thought those were all really interesting points, and that there needs to be more attention on actually getting Parliament working better as it is. And this report also pointed out that the 3-year electoral cycle tends to lead to short-termism, it called it. And so, maybe there's an argument for a 4-year term, but you'd really want to have some more of those checks and balances in place, because we've seen in this last term that the current government has pushed through so many of its ideologically based legislation without these processes being really followed closely. So, I think there's certainly room for tightening up practices and standards, and also being truly representative of the people.
Sue, do you like MMP, or do you prefer something else?
Stolen thunder. The other panelists have stolen some of my thunder tonight. I think the original report really missed an opportunity to be a bit more visionary, and they came out with these little options, and I thought, well, that's rather, tunnel visioned. And I come from Australia, obviously, and so we have an upper house, and I was very used to the single transferable vote system, and that's what I'd love to see. We've done it at civic level before, so people are very used to it, they're comfortable with it, and it would deal with the wasted vote issue. Very effective. Will we get it changed? I don't know, because under MMP we've reduced our governance to a mere numbers game. And when you think about all the contentious laws that we've had to fight, and the time spent in select committees, all worthy fights, but what ends up happening, it goes back to Parliament, to a handful of to our MPs, our overinflated number of MPs, and it is reduced to a numbers game. And have we got this vote? Have we got this number? Have we got that? And it just is soul destroying when you can dismiss what has actually been said and the concerns of select committee, and it sets itself up for really bad law. You talk about list MPs. I'd like to bring up Winston Peters. Do we know any of his MPs that he will, if he does get into Parliament come October, do we know his MPs that are going to be coming in? Because a heck of a lot of them have gone by the wayside. Do we know them? Do we know these list MPs that are coming in some of these smaller parties? And I think the media does a disservice to some of those smaller parties and doesn't play the true in the spirit of MMP of smaller parties, like you say, selective, do a top interview and things like that. So we are missing an upper house. In Australia, we actually have state government, then we have federal, and there are both upper houses in state and federal. So you see a slower process of law moving through as well. They're my concerns, and I think it was very, very tunnel visioned, and I don't like any of those proposed changes. Even the one about reducing political donations. What are they asking the taxpayer to fund some of these weird ads that we're already seeing? We see ads for ACC, we see ads for all these government departments. Do we need those on our television screens? And do we need the taxpayer paying for our political parties to have advertising?
Okay, just finally, Alfred, you've fought the system, you've had to compete in it. Is it a good system, MMP, or is there something better?
Look, I'm just getting to Brendan's point. In 2012 we had a referendum, and what happened then is that what was proposed, especially by the National Party at that time, was to have an MMP that actually comprised of STV, a single transferable vote, inside of it. So it was a compromise to try and incorporate. So there wasn't any wasted vote. But to be honest, Brendan, we couldn't get the support either through referendum or in Parliament, in which you needed 75% to get that across the line. And so basically we stayed with the status quo. But I just want to remind us that, our whole parliamentary history, we're one of the youngest democratic countries in the Commonwealth. In fact, in 1854, when we began Parliament, it was a bicameral house. In other words, it had an upper house and a lower house. It changed in 1950. One of the reasons it changed is because we just didn't have the population to support what they call a bicameral system. So they went to a unicameral, one house that operated. That operated again. So we had that whole operation for 150 years. And first past the post then lost confidence amongst the people and amongst the nation. And so the campaign was over 40 years to change that. And so And one of the reasons that they wanted change is they wanted more diversity, better accountability. And so did we get that? Well, we got more diversity for sure. Did we get accountability? Yes. But one thing I want to say is that you can keep changing and tinkering the system, but what lies underneath is the character of the people who get into that system. Look, I was a list MP for 9 years, and I know that the way I ran my office, the way I conducted myself, is as if I was an elected MP. There were those who discriminated, and to be honest, on the inside of Parliament and said, "Oh, you're just a list MP. You don't truly represent us." And yet, many of us that were in there as list MPs, we worked incredibly hard because we felt that we were in the House of Representatives. That was our role of responsibility. I just don't think the public actually were aware of actually what the true roles were. But we're now here. I think that people are actually back to where we were in 1993. We've lost confidence in the system. We want something different. Lowering the age to 16 isn't going to fix it, and all the other tinkering that's happening at the moment. The only thing I would say that could fix things is if we adopted what we had, what Germany has, which is the ability for the coalition choice to be made by the party that gains the largest, which is called party votes inside that election term. So that's the only thing I would change at the moment, though I do think an STV would be better.
Okay, now just a quick public service announcement. The Forum on the Family and the Gala Dinner are coming up at the end of next week. Let's meet some of the international guest speakers.
Hey, I'm Walt Heyer. I'm looking forward to coming to New Zealand for the family conference at the end of June. And I'm just thrilled to be there and looking forward to sharing my story with all of you in New Zealand.
Hi, I'm Deborah Ackerson, and I am a 2-time Olympian and 5-time Commonwealth Games medalist competing for Australia in weightlifting. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you at the end of June at the Forum on the Family.
Hello, I'm John Anderson, former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia from the Howard era, and I'm looking forward very much to being with you in New Zealand.
I'm Kevin Sabet. I'm president of Smart Approaches to Marijuana and also the Foundation for Drug Policy Solutions. And I'm really looking forward to the Family Forum in Auckland in June.
Hey everyone, it's Lila Rose, and I'm so looking forward to being at New Zealand's Forum on the Family.
Yep, there we go. And you need to register no later than Friday at midnight because registrations are closing and we are just about full up. So don't delay, forumonthefamily.nz. Right, let's move on. The government recently announced a new public information campaign with tips suggesting that New Zealanders should have shorter showers and don't turn their heaters above a certain temperature. It was called the Find the Money in Weird Places campaign, launched by Minister Megan Woods to help inform Kiwis on ways to keep their homes warm and dry with lower power tips. The tips are: check you're on the best power plan, switch off appliances at the wall when you're not using them, change your washing machine settings to cold wash, set your heat pump to a maximum of 21 degrees, and shorten your showers to 5 minutes. Now, the campaign is going to be all around the place. There's going to be a brochure delivered to 500,000 households and a 16-page booklet as well, distributed in 7 languages. And the really good news is you're paying $2.8 million for this advice. National said Kiwis need some leadership, not a lecture. And look, this all sort of, before I come to the panel, this sort of all reminds me of 2008 with what actually killed Helen Clark's government: the anti-smacking law, the light bulbs, the low flow shower heads. There was this proposal by the government of a 6 litre a minute flow limit for showers, and they were also going to place restrictions on the size of household hot water cylinders as well. And there was a mass furore. So at the time, National were the opposition party then as well, and they said it's a vote for a nanny state government spending your taxes to tell you what light bulbs to use, how much water can flow through your shower head, and how much hot water you can use. So panel, look, I'm not going to ask you what that heat pump is on behind you, Bruce, and I'm not going to ask Sue how long you spent in the shower today, but do we need this type of advice? Is it a good spend of taxpayers' money? Alfred, you're not using a heat pump because you're burning firewood. So perhaps you could start us off. Do we need this advice, or is it nanny state?
Well, first of all, I just want to say let's be kind to our nannies. I grew up with my grandmother, and she was a really awesome lady. You know, she was half Jewish, and her name was maiden name was Rita Goldstein. So you can't. So it was the house was frugal, right? We already had that, you know, so we didn't have to worry about being frugal. But at the same time, too, it was optimistic. And I think the thing is that what they're trying to get to is that, you know, Kiwis don't like being told what to do, and that's the bottom line. And there's no sense in this campaign, especially when we don't have confidence that we've got a government. And, you know, as was said a moment ago, the word competence. We don't have confidence that we've got a government that actually is going to spend wisely and be competent to be able to do the right thing. So why would they want us to be frugal when they haven't been frugal themselves? So, yeah, no, I just think it's ridiculous.
Okay, Sheree, are you recording how long you're in the shower for?
Well, I am a nanny, Bob, and a proud nanny. And actually,
A lovely nanny.
And cold showers are really good for you. They're actually a thing, along with ice baths and cold dipping, and they're good for your health. They produce endorphins, and I think really if everybody took cold showers, it would just increase the mental health level of the whole country.
Okay, do we need to spend $2.8 million of taxpayer money telling everyone that?
Well, I think the problem is that some people do need to know this information. Some people aren't aware of these things, but I don't know that they're the ones that would actually receive the information with this expensive campaign. But I think most people, you know, they take measures to save power. I mean, there are some things that I would have suggested that are not there, like your high power usage items like the oven and the dryer. You know, you can hang your washing out and then just finish it off in the dryer, things like that. But yeah, it is nanny state. It seems like a waste of money, and it's a little bit pathetic on the whole. By the way, we have solar panels, so you know, our power is half the cost anyway.
Yeah, actually, do you think you could do up a brochure telling my kids not to use the dryer and to hang their washing out more? That would be very helpful. Thank you, Sheree. Brendan, you're in Christchurch, so what's the heat pump on at the moment? What do you normally set it to?
Well, we've got a fire inside, but in my office I do have a heat pump, and it's often on 22. So I'm a gravely immoral man. I need to get to confession. It's a funny business. I mean, if my teenage daughters would listen to this advice about sharing, I'd be a very happy man. In fact, speaking of cold showers, my oldest daughter said to me the other day, "Don't panic, Dad. I do about 3 minutes of warm, and then the rest is cold. I do it for my endorphins." So she's obviously listening. But yeah, for me, I look at this and I think this is just life hacks. You can find this out on the internet. I think you're right. Are the right people actually going to hear this message? This feels like a campaign that was looking for a problem, rather than something that's actually focused. And the big thing for me is, why is the government doing this? This feels like someone who's doing what we call busy work, saying, look at us, we're really productive, we're spending your taxpayer money well. No, you're not, because this is not your job. There are other people beneath you who are far more competent at doing things like this. The internet is one very good example of that. YouTube has got plenty of these kind of tips. And as we've already heard, some of the key ones weren't even on there. So yeah, I just think the whole thing is particularly wasteful. You're right about the nanny state angle and the risk and all of that. But I think more so at a time when we are facing serious issues like the cost of living crisis and an economic problem that's very, very serious, to be sort of telling us how to manage our showers and our own homes when most people are already doing it tough anyway, I think it's just, I think for a lot of people, that's just a bridge too far.
Okay, well, Helen Clark was in full flight, and she had the label nanny state. And I remember when I was on radio, Bruce, we'd often have some interviews, and we were railing against the nanny state at that stage. Is this more of it? Is it back?
Hasn't gone away.
Doesn't matter who the government is.
No, I don't think so. It doesn't seem to anyway. I mean, we all have our nannies, and as Cherie's pointed out, they advocate cold showers from time to time for our own good, and so they should. But the trouble is, if you give nanny the power of the purse, it tends to go to her head. And she wants to create a world in her own image, even if she's a very good nanny. And that's, of course, the state is the nanny, and they want to create something in their own image, the way they want us to go, and they will seduce us into doing so. And we're told ad nauseum how to do it. And meanwhile, the irony is the government spends money to tell us how not to spend money. So it's all rather odd to me, on one hand, but on the other hand, it's obvious. And so in the meantime, I'd like to make a word for the nannies and rate on them, but don't let the state become one.
And do you record how long you're in the shower, Bruce? Do you set the stopwatch?
Regularly. No, I have a cold shower every morning to wake up.
Do you?
No, I'm telling lies.
No, of course you are. And I bet
He's
you've got
English,
the heat pump
Bob.
on.
He's English.
Yeah.
You'd be in the bath, mate. Be in the bath.
Yeah, you'd be in the bath. And I bet you've got the heat pump on 25 as well, Bruce.
No, I haven't, you see. I've only got it at 21 because someone
well
told
done.
me I should have it at 21.
What a compliant voter. Well done. Sue, you're in Masterton. It is very cold, but I think you use the fireplace, don't you?
Yes, we do. Rural area, we have our fires. Is that going to be the next thing the government decide to take off us? It's a cheap source of heating for us. My husband goes out and actually gets firewood for us. We've got Woodshed Hilton. It's designed with an inch of its life to be able to accommodate me chopping wood with an axe in the air, and I don't hit the roof. Maybe we should rename the Labor Party the Good For You Party, because they like to tell us what is good for us. And I think that's their problem, that they like to micromanage us, and we don't like that. And they need to remember that remember where their governance ends and our lives begin. And they do live in a bit of a bubble away from reality. But I quite like my fire, and I don't want them to take away our ability to warm our house. Bruce has probably got a heat pump on because he's not allowed to have a wood fire in Christchurch anymore.
Well, yeah, if you've got the right goodies.
The right goodies, yeah. Actually, it's interesting you say about that, Sue, because my memory on Facebook came up, and it was must have been this time last year or maybe 2 years ago when the Labor Party were wanting to outlaw utes. And then we found all these images of the Labor Party campaigning with utes, including a local MP not too far from you. So, it's interesting, one rule for me and one for thee, or whatever the saying is. Right, we're just about out of time. Last topic, team. Should we tax the rich more? Now, I just put together a very quick summary just to get us thinking. Here we go. The reason we should raise taxes on the rich: when economic times are tough, the government needs more money. A progressive tax system can prevent wealth discrepancies from getting too large, so in other words, the rich getting too rich. Taxing the rich is a form of wealth redistribution. Income from wealth is taxed less than income from work, so therefore rich people can have things like capital gains and inheritance. Economic growth can occur despite a raise in taxes, apparently. Some people argue since the 70s, incomes of the wealthiest have increased dramatically, but the income levels for the rest of us have barely changed. And money is needed to pay for government things. Now, the reasons we shouldn't raise taxes: governments waste much of the money that they collect. The raising of taxes acts as a disincentive. People argue that raised taxes have slowed the economy and led to market stagnation. There's numerous examples of how cutting taxes for businesses actually increase overall revenue. Higher taxes inevitably lead to a reduction of investment because you're just going to get taxed on it all. And increasing taxes for the wealthiest segment of society often encourages a class war situation, poor versus the rich. So let's go around the group, and we'll start with you, Alfred. Should we tax Bruce more?
No, we've got to look after Bruce. He's a good man.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Bruce is very skint.
I think this is part of almost like a Robin Hood type sort of budget and approach to try and create that, because it always sounds good, because we watch the movie Robin Hood and we think like, he had a noble cause. But the reality is, in this situation here, as the report has shown, we do have a fair tax system. I know that when we were in government and the things that we were doing, that it showed that the proportion of those who were paying the largest proportion of tax were actually those who were in the upper class of 170 to 300 plus K and what they were earning. So the system was fair enough. Really what it is at the moment is, and look, Ian Taylor wrote a great article that talked about the challenges that currently we have, is that we don't have a lot of trust and confidence in the current government, to be able to spend wisely, to be able to distribute the resources and the taxes that are paid in the right places. So, no, I don't think we should.
Okay, Bruce, should we be taxing the rich more? I mean, I think when we're talking about the rich...
I tend to agree with Alfred. I think that the rich already pay more tax than anyone else proportionally. So, and as well as that, if they're rich, they're likely to have companies, they're likely to be entrepreneurs, and they also supply employment for a lot more people. And that gives us more tax. So there's a secondary reason why. If I was going to sort of rejig the tax system, I think I'd rejig the levels, the categories of tax, and at the lower level that, for example, I can't remember the exact rate that people pay tax, but say, for example, you're paying 17% tax on income less than 60,000. Why not just simply raise the bar to 70,000, for example? And I have yet to hear a good moral case to defend a progressive tax system. I know we have a progressive tax system, but I don't know what the real good moral case is in its defence.
Okay, and you've obviously got a supporter because on our comments, Rex says, don't tax Bruce at all. He is a national with a small n, taonga. So there we are, you've got a supporter there. Well done, thanks Rex. Actually, just back to those figures, Alfred, that report said that for people earning between 180,000 up to 300,000, it's less than 2% of taxpayers, but they pay 9% of income tax. So you could argue that they're paying proportionately higher, but then again, they can afford it. Sue, do we need to tax the rich more?
No, I think it's creating that narrative of division. When they first started at Luxon, asking, making an issue about how many houses he had, we don't seem to remember how many Helen Clark had. It's all about that narrative of division, and it's not really helpful. It doesn't help any conversation. But I will add that recently the Children's Hospital in Wellington opened, and that was built actually by a very rich man in Wellington who wanted to see the very best for children's health and care, and he consulted with doctors and medical specialists, the very best Wellington Hospital could give to children, and he funded it all himself. Once he'd finished it, he handed over to the Ministry of Health. So he didn't give that money to government to disappear down a funnel. The rich people have, if we want that term, rich people, creative people, entrepreneurs, they have a place in our society, and I don't like the narrative of that is so divisive, and it's very discouraging. It lacks inspiration, giving people the go-getter attitude of do well for yourself. And I guess the government, the left-leaning government, probably don't like the rich people in the fact that they've got so much independence. They can do things for themselves independent of the government, and I guess that lessens their power.
Cherie, I mean, you're based up north, and unfortunately parts of the north are the most impoverished in New Zealand. Do the more wealthy in New Zealand need to do more for those areas? Do they need to be more generous?
Well, I think we need to remember that the taxes that we collect from the rich do help provide all the services, in health and education. And there was an important study done by, which came out of UCLA by Roma and Roma, which found that there's that certain point, it's called the Laffer curve, that if you go beyond a certain point, if you raise the taxes too high, government revenue actually decreases. So if you go too high, it becomes a disincentive, and that sweet spot is around 33%. So I think our taxes are just below that. And I saw a figure the other day of a guy who earns his annual revenue is $80 million. He pays $40 million in tax, and you think about what that provides in terms of services around the country. So I think we should appreciate the fact that the rich have a place in our society, which is very important. And as Sue has said, we have some wonderfully generous philanthropists who provide these wonderful services for our society. So I don't think we should take this attitude of despising the rich, which seems to be a common thing. And as much as I'd like to be rich, and I'm not, we should respect that they do contribute a lot. But another thing too is that the Inland Revenue wrote off $688 million of tax debt in 2022. So these are unpaid taxes from the self-employed. So again, the government could be doing better in collecting some of the taxes that are due.
Yeah, I think, Brendan, that is one of the arguments, isn't it? That the government wants more money, but they're not that responsible and not that fiscally responsible for what they're already getting. Why do we want to give them more?
Yeah, well, this is the thing for me. I think there's a couple of things that are missing here. One is the fact that our tax brackets have not been inflation adjusted. They have been, apart from the top tier 39%, which is recently created, the other brackets have been this way since 2010. That's 13 years. And so people are actually paying too much tax already. And so what we actually need to do is, like, apparently if you're earning 60K a year, which is an average salary now, if we actually adjusted properly for inflation, you would actually be saving about $2,000 a year in tax. That would probably help pay for your grocery bill right now. So stuff like that matters. I think that's an injustice. That if you're a social justice party like Labor claims to be, well, commit to fixing that problem. If you're national and you claim to be savvy about tax, commit to fixing that problem. It's not. I'm not hearing it, and I think that's a really big issue. Secondly, I think what matters here as well is there's a bigger conversation to be had. We're stuck in this false dichotomy. Should we tax or should we not tax? I want to know, like you said, well, where's the money being spent? We need a conversation about how money's being spent, and I think how we're taxing. Is this actually the best mechanism, the mechanisms that we are using? And I think there is an interesting interplay between how money is made, what it's used on, and we cannot forget, I think, what is the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about, and that is the fact that we've got pretty reliable data now that Christian societies are actually better at altruism. They give more to charity. And I want to know how much that's having a bearing on people's, situation. Like I grew up in real poverty as a young guy. I grew up in a welfare class family. There were times when we didn't know where the next meal was coming from. And if it wasn't for genuine Christian charity, we wouldn't have got fed at times. It was not uncommon to run out of toilet paper before welfare check. And so for us, that Christian charity really made a huge difference. And I can't help but sense that we're not considering this bigger picture of economics and virtue. And that's what's been missing from the conversation, because we don't want Marxism, that's for sure, and we don't want communism. But I would argue that there are some problems with capitalism that we need to address, some moral issues that do need to be addressed. It is not a utopian system. It's not perfect. And what's missing here is that underpinning reality of the Christian vision of reality, human dignity, and how we actually care for and show love to each other. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm not interested in your bank balance. I'm interested in your moral character. That's what really interests me. And I think that's the conversation we're not really having at all.
Well,
okay, great stuff. I know if Ronji was here, he'd be yelling out, I've got to go to bed. Bob, hurry up and wrap this up. We are over time. So just a quick reminder, the one thing I forgot to say to you all is that most of our panelists are going to be at the gala dinner in the forum, so you get to meet them in person. So there's motivation for people to come, isn't it, team, to the forum, forumonthefamily.nz, but you do need to register by the end of this week. We close Friday at midnight, no excuses, no latecomers. So make sure you register. Panel, it's been an absolute privilege. A special thanks to Cherie and Sue and Brendan for coming in. Brendan, especially at late notice. Cherie, lovely to have you back after last week. And Sue, always, as our board member on the panel. And to our regulars, Alfred and Bruce. And have a great week. We will see you. And remember, heat panels at 21 showers, no longer than 5 minutes. We will be checking, we will be watching, which is a pretty horrible thought. Okay, team, have a great week. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk at 8 o'clock. Bye. Yeah.